Welcome to a very special live episode of Buckeyes tomorrow morning for Wednesday, November 13th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Northwestern game in 3 days, the game against Michigan in 17 days. Joined by Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com. And Tony, normally we're talking about, who are the Buckeyes playing this weekend? Or, what's new with the Buckeyes? This weekend, it's all about where the Buckeyes are playing this weekend. Historic Wrigley Field, home of your favorite baseball team. Certainly one of the Major League Baseball teams, historically. This is also a game where you talk to Ryan Day, you talk to Will Howard. They both had some thoughts on, this is going to be a little bit different, but this is also going to be pretty cool.
Yeah, and one of the things Ryan Day is doing that is different is they'll be going to the stadium on Friday just to get the lay of the land. They don't normally do that, but because you're entering a baseball stadium, they want to look at the sod, they want to look at the field. They're going to be at halftime going into the bullpen rather than the locker room. Mm-hmm. So just getting the logistics and, like I said, the lay of the land on all of that. So they'll be there Friday to take a look at it. For the older folks, it's probably more of a pretty cool historical thing, even though Will Howard said he's excited about it too. Everybody had said they've been to games there, talking to Chip Kelly and Ryan Day and Will Howard. They've all seen baseball games there. Mm-hmm. This will be their first opportunity to experience football. So, yeah, they're all looking forward to it. The history of the park is one that everybody appreciates. America's favorite baseball program.
Certainly one of America's baseball.
They call them America's team, Tom.
Do they? Jared Jones and
Harry Carey called him America's team.
Yeah, well, Harry Carey said a lot of stuff. I don't know if that's true.
That's not true.
This is a different enough game that Ohio State's taking a little bit of a break from their normal Friday protocol to take an early trip there just to kind of get a little bit of a look around and figure out what's what.
Yeah, they'll notice that the ivy is not probably there any longer, but you'll see it's going to be the whole Hoosiers Hickory thing where the rim is still 10 feet, the lane is still 15 feet, and you'll see where the walls are. I know people are concerned about the end zones being too close to the walls. That is a feature in a lot of parks, but this is a place that has had football in it before and not just college football in the last 2 decades. There used to be NFL football there as well. So they have now finagled it to where both teams will have their own sidelines, opposite sides of the field. So that's good. Ryan Day did assure everybody that it is 100 yards, although I hope he meant 120.
Yeah.
Rather than just 100. But yes, they will be able to go from one side of the field to the other. There will be no half-court basketball in this one. No worries there. And it seems like since the week after the announcement that this game was coming, there's the concern for the health and the safety and all of that has gone away as people have explained it to those who are concerned.
Yeah, I think everyone has this view of this is the 2009 Wrigley Field setup where it was Northwestern and I think Iowa, it might have been Northwestern and Illinois, one of them, where they had to go the same direction because there was not enough space to safely do it in both directions. That has all been addressed. They've kind of worked out the kinks, and you've gotten to the point where now you're no longer both on the same sideline.
Yep.
You're now, it's more of a traditional layout where you're on different sidelines. It's not a football field. It's not a football stadium. You are still, like you said, they're going to be halftime is going to be on the field, like in the bullpen. It's going to be a little different.
Like COVID, when in high school COVID, like the locker rooms would just be in the end zone, basically, for some of the stuff. So the whole ordeal of it, I'm looking forward to, and it's all going to be a bucket list item experience for all of the players. It may not be the coziest of confines. It is the friendly confines, Tom. It's not the cozy confines. It is not the cozy confines,
no. So that's going to be...
Pick up where they're doing halftime.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thanks for watching. It is definitely a new and exciting thing for the Buckeyes. Something that will not be new and exciting, Tony. It's a noon kickoff. Something that has brought great joy to many in Buckeye Nation. The players and coaches all seem fine with it. And, whatever, what are they going to say? But I think that's generally something that players and coaches do kind of like to just, Will Howard talked about not wanting to just sit around the hotel all day and get into your own head. It's 6 straight noon games to end the regular season, which is weird. But it's also kind of it is what it is at this point.
Well, and as Will Howard said, you guys, if you were watching, he prefers just getting up and going and playing. Like the biggest concern for coaches the night before is just getting everybody to bed. Whereas when they're playing a night game, you're trying to, on Saturday, you're keeping everybody off their feet. You've got meals to worry about. You've got, just conditioning, like hydrating, and, are you relaxed? Are you a little antsy? Like, just so many other things to worry about, as opposed if it's just a noon game, you get up, you get out of the hotel, you get to the park, and then you go play. And there's less worry or concern and just things to deal with. It's just more about football. And so I think that's why universally you'll hear coaches and players say they prefer that. And, way back when games were all like at 1 o'clock, 1:30 here. So it's, there's a reason for that. And it's not just because lights, but it would be nice to have a night game around here, but I guess you have to wait until the postseason.
Yeah, don't worry. Ohio State's going to be playing plenty of night games, Big Ten championship game, if they get there. And they have work to do to get there, but if they get there, good news, that's a primetime game. If they win the Big Ten championship game, you're going to be playing in the Rose Bowl, which will start in the late afternoon and end at night. If you make it to the semifinals, good news, they're both at night. If you make it to the national championship game, good news, it's at night. You can earn your way into a whole bunch of night games. Not at home, but you can earn your way into a whole bunch of night games. But that all depends on the work they do the next 3 weeks.
But there was also a playoff game that kicks off at noon that we talked about yesterday. So lock that one in for the Ohio State fans.
And so, that would be the Peach Bowl, and that would be if they are not the Big Ten champion and they win. And that would be likely either the 5 or the 6 seed, depending on how that all shakes out. And we're going to get into the playoff stuff more later tonight when we have the playoff live show. The show starts, our show and also the ESPN show starts at 8:30 tonight, correct? Yes, I believe. And so we'll have that coming up a little later on. So, all right. So that's the Wrigley Field stuff. The only other thing we got to talk about for Saturday, we're playing all the hits today. Everyone wants to talk about noon games right now. Everyone wants to talk about, we'll get to the turf issues at Ohio Stadium in a minute. But Tony, what's everyone's favorite thing to ask us about? The weather. So Tony, Ryan Day seemed very happy with the weather forecast for Saturday.
Yeah, I think it was Bill Rabinowitz that said, the current forecast is calling for like 10 to 15 mile per hour winds, and Day's like, oh good. Because he said the game there 2 years ago was a nightmare, and as you all remember, the hurricane force winds, the O'Hare Airport recording like 80 mile per hour winds a few miles away, and it was the not ideal conditions, as you all remember. And yet CJ Stroud, they're still trying to throw downfield because, yes, he is the greatest quarterback in Ohio State history, but he cannot beat Mother Nature, not in that game, even though they did ultimately win, but it was not due to the passing, one of the lowest offensive outputs for Ohio State over the last decade. Yeah.
So that was, and he talked about how crazy that win was. You could sort of forget, but he said there was a moment during the pregame warmups where someone was punting and the ball went up in the air and blew back behind the punter. And he said he went over to the official and went, so if that happens in the game, what is that? Because that was not covered. This is not in the manual that the punt went backwards. Is that live? What's going on?
Can Ohio State return that then?
Yeah. Can you catch it and it's like a pass?
Because it does go past the line of scrimmage, but it doesn't stay past the line of scrimmage.
True. Yeah. So yes, that does not sound like that will be a problem. Something that could be a problem: the turf at Ohio Stadium. That's been another thing that we've gotten asked about a whole bunch, and it feels like there have been a ton of different potential answers to the conversation. And is it the turf? Is it the game where it was super hot? Was it the heat? Is it the Joel Klatt brought up on the broadcast? Hey, the marching band kind of marching, and maybe they maybe pack it down and make it slick. What did Ryan Day have to say about the turf?
Well, I thought there were going to be more people asking. I did ask if, you guys are always doing these studies. Have you done any studies about the slip rate here compared to other places? And he said that because they have this turf here, it's the same turf here in the Woody as it is in Ohio Stadium. They monitor the slips, and then they send that feedback back to the company so that they have all of that information. But he did say they've altered some things, they've changed some things. He didn't go into detail about what they were, but that, when there is slipping, they try to address it. And, whether that's Will Howard getting new cleats at some point or everybody getting new cleats if they're having issues, they are certainly aware of it because they're there's no reason not to be aware of everything. And we always go back to the Jim Tressel when he got hired at Ohio State. He did the study about the wind affecting punts in Ohio Stadium, because you're looking for that kind of information, that kind of minutia, because you can ultimately it might be the difference in a win or a loss. And so they are monitoring the slips. Doesn't sound like anything is going to be done anytime soon, but they're building the information in case they do want to do something.
Speaking of building things, Tony.
Yes.
Speaking of transitions, bricks in the foundation. This is not something we've heard a lot about. Normally, you've got the team and they've got their thing and they read the book about climbing the mountain or whatever over the summer, and then you just get absolutely beaten into your head all season. Now, it's football season, Tony, is a little like climbing a mountain, in fact. This is not something we've heard a ton about. But they're using bricks this year as a little bit of a motivational thing, a little bit of a understanding the big picture kind of thing.
I guess this is something Ryan talked about on the radio show last week about after every practice, they give a particular player a brick and they go add it to a foundation that they're building. And you've got to, you are building the foundation. So don't put the brick willy-nilly, don't stand it up on end, put it where it needs to go, where it's going to be strong, where it can support another brick, or where it can create this foundation that can withstand a loss, can withstand needing a touchdown in the fourth quarter to win a game. Where you are, it's figurative, it's a little literal, but it's a lesson that everybody's taking into account, that every day you are building this foundation to withstand whatever hurricane force winds in Northwestern, or just a difficult fourth quarter, a turnover, sliding with 1 second left on the clock and losing a game. Like, these are all things that the adversity that you have to overcome if you're ultimately going to build this massive house with all of these banners that you want to hold.
And one thing they've had to overcome adversity-wise this year is injuries. They've had a bunch of those to deal with, some very serious and season-ending. Speaking of which, it was good to hear Will Howard refer to Josh Simmons as Jimmy. So the nickname lives. Good news. An injury that was less serious is Tyleik Williams. Got an update on him today.
Yeah, he is good to go. As you know, Tom, he could have played last week, but they just want to be a little bit more careful with him.
Wild.
And the interesting part about him not playing was also that allowed them to maybe use the jack some, because it just does require one defensive tackle. So since they were going to be without one here and there, they went ahead and did that. Ryan Day was asked about Aaron Scott at the end. He said he's day to day, but all signs are positive there that he'll be available at some point.
Another player that we've talked about behind the scenes, and I don't know that we've talked very much publicly about him, is a guy who played one season for the Buckeyes 22 years ago, but who's been around the program a lot this year, Maurice Claret. And he has had a long and twisting road from the time that he left Ohio State to the time that he's now back at Ohio State. But you didn't see him around the program for like 20 years, like not at all. And this year, not only is it's not like, he came to this one game one time and it's like, everyone clapped for him this one time. He's around the program a lot. So what is Maurice Claret doing right now?
Yeah, I asked Ryan about that. Like, what's the thought process? And basically, he's been through a lot, as we all know, and not football, but in life, but also football.
Yeah, and
has been the biggest name in the sport and has gone his own way, but then has made himself a success and is a success through all of the odds, highs and lows. So he is here every once a week at practice. He comes to the games. The players really like him. He can relate with everything that all of these guys are going through with, and then some. Because you think you're a freshman and you're a star. Like, let me tell you about Maurice Claret back in the day. Like, if he didn't get hurt, he was going to win a Heisman, I believe, in 2002, and everybody knew who he was. And there's good lessons and bad lessons that come from that, and he can give them all to you. So I think it's a really interesting resource for Day and for the players, and to have him around. As Ryan also said, he's tough, and he also like to have that mentality around as well.
Well, I think you look back at his true freshman season, and that is about the closest analog I can come up with to the Jeremiah Smith 2024 season, where you're a true freshman, you just showed up, he showed up for the spring.
Mm-hmm.
That was Maurice Claret basically pioneered that,
Yep.
the early enrollment. Now that's just like enrollment, and then there's late enrollment. But he showed up in the spring and had kind of that same sort of trajectory where the spring was kind of like, oh, okay. Now, he was maybe a little behind Jeremiah Smith in terms of the hype in the spring. But in terms of the immediate impact, he had, 175 yards against Texas Tech in the season opener and 3 touchdowns.
3 touchdowns. Could have been 6.
Yeah. Well, and then you have, and Jeremiah Smith, I think, could very easily tell just about everyone in the building, you don't understand exactly what this is like. I don't think you could say that to Maurice Claret. That's just in that one relationship alone, I think that might be a really, really valuable experience. Like, hey, I have been in your shoes. Here's what not to do.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and if the aspect of if I had it all to do over again, here's what I would suggest. And so, in so many ways, a valuable resource for not just Jeremiah, but for anybody else, because, like I said, he's been through it all, and he's come out the better for it, and is here for them.
Last couple things I wanted to ask you about, and then we're going to get to some questions. So if you've not thrown questions in there, please do.
Also, a thumbs up.
Also, a thumbs up. Please do that as well. TreVeyon Henderson was a hot topic of conversation. Just how good he's looked. Will Howard also talked about him in the passing game and how much work he's put in, where you see the great over-the-shoulder catch in the game, but that didn't just happen. Yeah,
no, and those aren't easy catches for running backs with the pads that they're wearing and things like that. But that route that he ran, the slant and go, and we talked about it after the game, but this was something that they had been working on, and this has been something that TreVeyon Henderson has wanted for, I think Ryan Day said, years now. And so when they finally had the opportunity, and they worked on it this past week to really get it done. And so Ryan and TreVeyon had a good moment afterwards. But even the little things like Will Howard talking about looking off the safety, and the safety goes running for a Mecca, and you're just leaving TreVeyon Henderson one-on-one with a linebacker, which if you can do that multiple times per game, you should do that because it's not a fair fight. And he really ran that route, and he left that dude in his dust. And more of that for this Ohio State offense, which is why you can play Quinshon Judkins and TreVeyon Henderson together when you've got a running back running routes like that.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, there's. It feels like you're really starting to unlock the TreVeyon Henderson potential. I said this to you on one of the shows we recorded earlier in the week. This is the TreVeyon Henderson that we were promised, and just between just the wear and tear and injuries and all that kind of stuff, it hasn't always shown up on the field. But man, oh man, is it showing up on the field for Ohio State right now, and that is a very, very, very good piece of news for the Buckeyes. Will Howard also talked about one of the great press conference moments. He was asked 2 questions back-to-back about awards. And, Tony, he had very different answers about the Heisman Trophy and the Joe Moore Award.
Yeah, he was asked about the Heisman. He's like, yeah, not really focused on that. As long as we're winning and, they're scoring points and winning, he's happy with that. So you don't want to get lost and focused on awards because it's not about that. And then the next question, I think it was Spencer Holbrook with Letterman Row. Like, well, this is kind of a difficult transition to ask this, but what do you think about the offensive line being semifinalists for the Joe Moore Award? And everybody laughs, and Will Howard's like, "That's great for them." I don't care about awards myself, but for all of the grief that they have gotten and for the job that they have done to overcome losing 2 left tackles and to be playing as well as they are and to be recognized for it, he's thrilled. And Chip Kelly said something similar, like, these are guys that don't get recognized. They buy their clothes from True Value Hardware,
which is a great line.
Is a line from, I don't know, the 80s or 90s perhaps, but yes, a very, very apt. I think everybody understood what he meant.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, not the lunch pail mentality is, I believe, what they would call it back in the 80s. So, all right, do we have anything else before we get to questions?
No,
anything
I'm
else
good.
I didn't get to? Okay, all right.
All right. First thing, Bill Evans just checking in to see if Tony is still with us. This morning on the radio, Dave Biddle said he sat next to Tony Gerdeman from the Ozone.
Oh, sounds like the question is whether Dave's with us. And,
no, I'm still here.
He's right over there.
I mean, those were the days. I don't even know the last time I sat next to Biddle at anything.
No.
I'm not saying he's lying.
Yeah,
I mean, it's right over there. Liar. No.
Odysseus, can Tom answer why nobody plays football in the Mets Stadium?
So why does no one play football in the Mets Stadium in Citi Field?
Pro sports are not allowed
they
there.
Play, I believe, they used to play the New York City Football Club, I think, used to play there. The soccer team, which is a kind of football. I think they used to play there, but they might play in the Yankee Stadium now. The New York Jets used to play in Shea Stadium back until they built the original Giants Stadium. I believe 1983 was the last year they played in Shea Stadium. And Tony, did you know there was a year when the Giants, the Jets, the Yankees, and the Mets all played in Shea Stadium? I believe it was 1974 or so. They were renovating Yankee Stadium. Which is where the Giants used to play, and the Jets always played in Shea Stadium, and then the Yankees and the Giants also played there. I bet the turf was in great shape December that year.
They probably didn't really care about turf back then. You look at the old NFL films, and it's like, this used to be grass. This is all just dirt and mud. What would we know the Yankees host a bowl game, the Pinstripe Bowl. What would a bowl game wherever the Mets play be called?
Well, they play in Citi Field, okay. It could be the City Bowl. It could be the Mr. Met Bowl. I would like the Big Apple Bowl, because they have the Big Apple that comes out of the hat. I think the Big Apple Bowl is your answer there.
Yeah, okay, I could go with that.
Two questions that are similar, so we're going to lump them together. Ed Rogers, is Indiana a top 12 team? And John Bruce Ferguson, okay, fellas, what's y'all's honest opinion on Indiana? Are they a serious threat like Penn State was? Is this going to be a physical fight for 4 quarters?
It's interesting because we both just got done watching Indiana, Michigan. So I do not think they're a top 12 team based on what I saw against Michigan.
Well, they are because the rankings say they are.
But also, I think they can. Who among like the 3 through 15 are all together that different from everybody else, so any given day. But I think Ohio State fans, if they watch that Michigan game, have to feel a lot better about the Indiana game than beforehand. But also, don't get overconfident, because this is a team that executes very, very well. They dropped some passes. This game would have been a little uglier than if they had executed as well as they normally do. Yes, they're a top 12 team, because I think there's probably, like I said, you could throw any of those teams in there and they have a good shot. I don't know that they have the overall talent of a lot of the teams in that top 15.
Right, and that's a team that hasn't gotten pushed defensively. They haven't played a great offense really this year. An offense the caliber of Ohio State's in terms of the weapons that Ohio State has, absolutely untested like that. The fact that the Indiana offense looked dynamite in the first half, very easily could have been up 21-3, maybe even more than that at halftime. And if you're up 21-3, then at that point, Michigan's really kind of up against it. They held them to a field goal. I think they got stopped in Michigan territory, close to it at one point, and they made mistakes. They did the stuff that you can't do against Michigan. If you just play clean, you're going to beat Michigan, because Michigan is just not that great this year. But if you make mistakes and you drop passes, and they had one pass that was a drop on a 3rd down, and that was the end of a possession, and they had one pass that was dropped close to the end zone that they had to settle for a field goal. I mean, that's potentially 7 to 10 more points there. So you add that up, and boom, that's a very different kind of game. This is an Indiana team where it feels like we have really one data point, because they've played a lot of not much this year. So you've played one team kind of with a pulse, and they looked pretty good for one half and terrible for the other half. So you have seen Ohio. It's like if Ohio State had played no one except Nebraska this year,
right?
And you looked at Ohio State and went, well, they've killed all these teams, but they look like crap against Nebraska. And Nebraska's barely going to be bowl eligible, maybe.
Well, that's Michigan.
So if you want to, I think you got to take a little bit more of a broad view on that, because you can look at any one team. We did this a couple of years ago where we went back and we rewatched Georgia games, and it was like you rewatch the Georgia-Oregon game where they won 49-3 or whatever it was, and it's like this team could beat the entire NFC East, an all-star team of these 4 teams. And then you watch them play Missouri and Kentucky, who were not very good teams that year, and look like absolute hammered crap for 4 quarters. And it's like, I bet any 2 of the 3 Surface Academies could beat this team. And it's like you have to kind of take a little bit more of a holistic view of the whole thing, big picture. And the answer is they're a lot better than you've heard They're a ton better than you thought they were going to be. Are they really like a top 5 team in the nation? Maybe. Probably not. They're probably an underdog against a lot of the teams ranked in the 5 spots behind them. But they're good enough to beat Ohio State, I think. Yeah. They're not going to be favored to beat Ohio State, but they're good enough to beat Ohio State.
Nebraska almost did it, so that's all the math you need.
Yep.
Bootzilla could have 3 consecutive weeks of Gus and Joel starting next week.
Could have 3 consecutive weeks of Gus and Joel starting next week. You're going to, unless Ohio State loses, because they control their own. Ohio State controls its own destiny for 3 straight weeks of Gus and Joel. But then after that point, I know there's a little bit of Gus Johnson fatigue in the Ohio State fan base, but
there might be Gus Johnson fatigue in the Gus Johnson fan base as well, based on his touchdown call to Jack Sawyer.
Yeah, and that was a little bit, having rewatched the whole game, that was a little bit of an outlier. That was not, he spent the entire game calling it like he was on to Ambien. That was kind of like a play or two, and it was a terrible call, but it wasn't the whole game called like that. You also got to remember, he's getting paid a bunch of money. Yeah, you're supposed to be a professional. You're used to going and covering the best games every week. You are the number one guy for a major broadcast network. You're used to being at Red River. You're used to being at all these other things. So when you're used to traveling the country and seeing stuff in a bunch of different places. When you're in Ohio Stadium for the 5th time of the season, and also you're playing a terrible Purdue team, I get it. You're supposed to be a professional, but also you're a human being. You're allowed to be a little all right, here we go.
Yeah, it's an analogy I use a lot. It goes back to Jurassic Park. Tyrannosaurus Rex doesn't want to be fed. He wants to hunt. Gus Johnson doesn't want to be fed. The dude wants to hunt.
Well, we're going to Wrigley Field, and there's goats, the legends of goats there.
No goats, Tom.
No goats? No. Yeah, the Billy Goat, yeah. So anything else that we desperately need to get to, because we do need to wrap it up? Okay. All right. So good news. If you had questions that we didn't get to, we were getting booted out of here. So if you have questions that we did not get to, great news. We're going to have a whole nother live show later on tonight. Tony, Kevin, and I doing the college football playoff rankings reveal week number 2. That'll start at 8:30 on our YouTube channel, youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle. Should be very interesting week with a lot of potential changes, with Georgia having lost and Miami having lost, and some other changes. A bunch of stuff happened right below the top 16 or top 15. So Pitt having lost and all that kind of stuff. So going to be a lot of stuff to talk about tonight. We will be here at youtube.com/Buckeye Huddle at 8:30. Make sure you join us there. And also make sure you join us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. Got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there, making you a smarter football fan. Got a Ross Fulton offense show already on our board. You want to get an early look at that? Well, you can do that at BuckeyeHuddle.com right now. That'll come out a little later on this week as a regular old morning show. That will do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.